assumptions. Is it a synchronized network? Is it not a synchronized network? The more pristine things are with your assumptions, like, for example, a fixed quorum and in a synchronized network, the higher the performance can be. But it's a glass cannon. It's very brittle. The more disastrous your assumptions are, as you go from synchronous to asynchronous and affixed to a floating committee, and the more egalitarian your selection mechanisms are, generally that hurts your performance inside your system. And this is a super well-studied problem. And if you actually take the time to go through these two collections of courses, you'll actually understand in practice how remarkably intricate and beautiful this particular space is. So I just wanted to make this video to try to sort fact from fiction and let you guys know where these things sit. I'm really proud of the research that's been done for us. I mean, if you look at these are not easy papers to write. If you actually go through them and spend time with them, this wasn't just some babble. There was a huge amount of deep thought and very precise language. Every single one of these things were reviewed time and again, and external people looked at them and they said sometimes very harsh things. And you have to be intellectually honest with these types of papers. Like when you go to the Ouroboros original paper, let's find it for you guys. Actually, if you Google it, Ouroboros, cited 980 times. If you actually go in it, you'll notice something. It says previous work, and also it'll give credence to related and follow-up work. So, for example, you look through, it mentions fruit chain, it mentions Algorand, and all these other things. And actually, if you go to the Algorand paper, the 31 here, go to the citations. So, Poly, Algorand. You'll notice something. Paper actually cites, if you go Carlos, other paper close to us, Ouroboros, a proof of secure proof of stake protocol. It actually cites us. And right there is the citation there. And that's just how academia works. There's so much tribalism and brutal competition that exists inside the cryptocurrency space. In the academic world, this is just best practice. Everybody knows each other, they talk about each other, they learn from each other, and they piggyback. There are some really cool, and interesting, and fun things in the Algorand paper that Macaulay put together. And Macaulay is another one of those guys who got the Nobel Prize of Computer Science. He's one of the smartest guys in the entire cryptocurrency space. And it's just extraordinary that he's decided to honor this industry by being in the industry. And Macaulay's work stands for itself, and similarly, the work that's done here stands for itself by the citation count, the fact that it was accepted to the peer review process. And this doesn't make a product. The product is everything else. It's the collection of assumptions, economic assumptions, the social dynamics inside the system, and what that engine actually does. When we talk about throughput, not all transactions are created equally. Okay, so a transaction on Bitcoin is a very specific thing. A transaction on Ethereum is a very, very different thing. Okay, one is a general purpose computer, the other one is not. If you think about Ethereum or Cardano or any of these systems that aspire to have or do have smart contracts, basically you could be talking about a Uniswap transaction. You could be talking about purchasing a CryptoKitties. You can be talking about running and executing some sort of decentralized Uber. All Bitcoin can do is move a Bitcoin from one location to another location, one address to another address, and it carries with it some crypto capabilities, so you can build layer 2 infrastructure, and some metadata capabilities, so you can embed some metadata. But transactions in themselves are incredibly rich. There's actually 5 properties of them, 4 to the transaction and 1 meta property. You have assets that runs on the rail. You have identity, so those are the people behind it. You have metadata that runs with it. So for everything from the timestamp to why you're doing the transaction and so forth, the contractual construction, and then the jurisdiction, so the geographies and law. single component. Okay, so Bitcoin really only moves one particular asset, says nothing about identity, limited metadata capabilities, almost nothing about contractual capabilities, and is completely blind, deaf, and dumb. It operates. This is why we built Ethereum, because it does a lot more. It actually allows you to do all those things. But to do those things with a high throughput, high capacity engine does a lot of work for every block, and those things can happen quickly and do it low latency and be always available 99.997% of the time. Super hard, and it requires a large family of protocols. And the point of proof of stake is it gives us a much better overall engine and design, and a much more egalitarian approach, because you can have many synthetic resources. And then also, because you've eliminated an enormously expensive step, you can now reuse all those resources towards the network's benefits. So ultimately, you can operate the network much, much, much more efficiently than you could otherwise. Now, proof of work still does have its place and purpose, and actually there's a whole new family of proof of work protocols that are coming that make proof of work better and more efficient, like the Prism protocol that Prometheus wanted created, and we actually contribute there as well. And there's still tons of innovation in log space mining. Venus is Zinthos and Varus published that do deal with that. It's a rich topic. So, Jack, the long and the short is proof of work not equal to proof of stake. They're different engines. And to say that proof of work greater than proof of stake is really a crazy statement. That's like saying a truck is better than a Lamborghini. I have both. And I'll tell you, there's no reality that you can take your Lamborghini up to Wyoming, some Rose Ranch.
Oh, wow.
And I would never want to take the truck, the Chevy 2500, to a track. Okay, so it all depends upon the context, the assumptions, the environment, and other such dynamics, and what you're attempting to do with the system. You want to do very useful things. For example, you want to build systems that permit for assets, identity, metadata, contractual relationships, and automate the legal side, and you want to quantify your security internally to the system, then proof of stake is significantly better than doing things. You want to do other things, and perhaps proof of work is a better way of doing things as well, but there's a very deep and elegant story here, and I hope this helps you guys kind of grok and understand this entire story and why these things are the way that they are. The problem with Bitcoin maximalists is they've become a cult, and they don't really care about evidence. It's kind of as preposterous as saying, well, the Steam engine is the best engine ever, and we will never, ever move from the Steam engine, the cult of Steam. And if somebody comes to you with a battery-powered car or really highly optimized diesel internal combustion engine, and you say, no, this is much better than the Steam engine, you can provide all this evidence about horsepower and efficiency and operating cost and the portability of the fuel source, etc., and they won't care because it's not about empirical evidence. And there's no burden of proof or standard that you can provide. When we started this industry in 2015, we didn't know if proof of stake was real or not. There were a lot of people who supported that proof of stake was secure, but there was no foundation. There was no definition. There were no security models. There was no real rigorous analysis of the adversary. And it took years of research and going through the peer review process and discussing the matter with scientists all over the world, lots of prototyping, lots of competition, to get to a point where we could definitively say that under certain contexts, proof of stake not only works, but is absolutely the best protocol to use. And there's a long road to advocate. Now, that doesn't mean it's universally useful and amazing in every possible capacity and that all the research is done and that these protocols are final, but that's being humble enough to admit that the road has many steps ahead of it and the journey is very long. To say that everything that could ever be said and done in our industry was achieved in January 3rd of 2009, and that's that. It's exactly the same as the religious fanatic throws religious doctrine at you and says, no, the earth is only 7,000 years old because this book says so. And then you show them all the evidence and they say, no, I don't believe it. God has said so, and that is the final word, and that's the only evidence that I need. So they're trading one God for another God. And that's something you should never do. You should always be having an open mind. You should always try to understand what's the context behind these things. And do understand distributed systems is a very old field of computer science from the 1960s, 1970s. And people have been thinking about these things for over 5 decades. And as a consequence, there's an enormous corpus of tradition, knowledge, and best practices that exist. And everything is up to how are you using the system, why are you using the system, and ultimately, where do you want it to go, and what do you want it to achieve? What we've accomplished with Ouroboros succinctly is we run a global scale network that needs every day $10 billion and more value for less than 6 gigawatts of power per year. Bitcoin, on the other hand, is in the hundreds of terawatts, which is comparable to an entire nation state. And it's only going to get worse as the price of Bitcoin and use utility of Bitcoin goes up. Okay, so on a logical basis, proof of stake is significantly nearer forever than proof of work. What we've also achieved is constructing a system that has far more people involved in the construction of blocks. And that's not just a throwaway statement. There are literally thousands of stake pool operators who are registered and delegated to and making blocks every 10-15 seconds on the network. Just you can time your watch. Go and see the block explorers and see them come through. And there's probably stake pool operators watching this right now that I've never met, I know nothing about, but they have that right and responsibility. And it's dynamic. Every epoch, every 5 days, those distributions change. Some make blocks, some no longer make blocks. Some get retired, some new entrants come and so forth. So it's a dynamic quorum, and it's parameterized that as the value of ADA goes up, you get more and more and more of them over time. Okay, so these are already properties, in my view, that are significantly better from a decentralization viewpoint than proof of work, especially given that, as I mentioned, it's a virtual or synthetic resource. And so what that means is, let's say a particular country bans that asset, like China, and it says, oh, we hate Bitcoin now, mining is gone. Well, the problem with ASICs is when you optimize them, they're in data centers. They're very expensive and difficult to move from one place to another. There was a mine that had a problem, and the hash rate plummeted as a consequence. A synthetic resource, its jurisdiction can be relocated with the click of a mouse. Basically, move it to an address and hold those private keys and operate those servers somewhere else. So if there's a problem in Switzerland, you go to Liechtenstein. You can go to Chile, go to Australia, wherever you want. You can still be the same individual. You can just move the legal jurisdiction of the hosting infrastructure from one place to another with a turnkey. It might be a slight inconvenience, but it's not a logistical nightmare. In some cases, impossible. And there's no threat of sovereign seizure of these things because it's public cryptography. Okay, so for those properties alone, I think proof of stake is vastly superior to many of the things that we care about. But for the idea of being able to have multiple synthetic resources, not just one token, but other baskets of things, especially connected to governance or other activities, social benefit about the system, you end up, in my view, having a significantly more egalitarian system. As for security, security only matters against an adversary, and when he says it's more secure, I'd like to understand what he's actually defining security as. Jack, you can't just say X is more secure than Y. You have to say X is more secure than Y given these assumptions within this model against this type of adversary, and provide some evidence for that particular plan. But again, maximalists don't do this. They're part of a cult. They're not part of a rational thought dialogue. And that's just where we're at. People don't understand a lot about these things. They somehow decide that something's true, and they defend it very religiously with very little knowledge to patent that. It's extraordinary. Okay. So anyway, I hope this brief video helped you guys. It was a lot of fun to make. I enjoyed it. There you go. And I wish everybody a good day, and hopefully we can have more conversation in the future about distributed systems. If you guys do take those courses, let me know your experiences. At some point, we'll probably create some classes specifically about Ouroboros. The other thing is when we have Omega, I would absolutely make sure that we do a series of lectures on how Ouroboros Omega works. That's really the magnum opus of the entire Ouroboros agenda. And as a collection of scientists and engineers working our way up to that final paper that really pulls all the stuff together. It's the Lebowski, like the rub. It really ties things together. And we think that's going to be just the perfect way of doing proof of stake for a very long period of time. And you can really focus on layer 2 stuff as opposed to optimizing state layer. Okay, thanks everyone. This was a lot of fun. Cheers.
If you'd all like to give
Hay que jugar con los torres. Y eso le da tiempo a este man que resucite.
Yo nunca juego con cerillas.
A la torreta, brother.
Se acabó. Exterminados. Ha muerto un aliado.
Barata va a ganar esta vaina.
Asesinato doble. Exterminio.
Si una espada de hielo puro es poderosa,
Un inhibidor.
de hielo puro.
Sal, que te voy a encontrar.
Es más pequeño que en el diagrama.
Joder, qué mal. Pendejo.
Exterminados. Me han matado.
Para quién. Para que use la R para que se mate y viva, tío.
Buenos días.
Eres un niño llorón.
Me quedan pocas provisiones. Que se recupere.
Hue puta que hice, vale. Ahora sí, a dormir feliz. A mimir feliz.